I asked ChatGPT what the definition of mid was, and it told me the NFC South. A trio of 7-win teams, your 8-win division champion, Tampa Bay Bucks. Each team has a new starting quarterback. The division seems as wide open as any. Hey, we're back. Let's kick off our 2023 division previews with Baker Mayfield's NFC South. Let's hit the opening bell. It's 11:23 on Ball Street, July 20th. I'm Deep Value Better with Throw the Damn Ball, Judah Fort Gang. Our guest, Patton Analytics, Stephen Patton, a new face, a new voice of reason with Alpha Delivery this season. Stephen has some exquisite modeling abilities, has an economics background, so speaks our language. We stumbled upon some of his work this offseason. We've been collabing on some projects over the summer, so more to come from him. But welcome to Alphabets, our new show name. Like it? Judah, how has your summer been? I know how your summer's been, but for the sake of our audience, how's your summer been?
My summer has been great. I've been deep in the lab, researching, building. I think a lot of cool things that we'll have upcoming for this season. Quite frankly, by the time February rolled around, I was like, you know what? I love football season. I love the grind, but I'm kind of looking forward to the off season of research. And now that we're here, I hear that music again. I hear the beautiful sounds of the Sportfolio Kings intro. And I'm like, when is September? I'm dying to get back into it.
And it'll be here before you know it. I can't believe it's already July 20th.
Yeah. It's so
Stephen, how about you?
About the same. Been deep in the lab. Been working on a couple models, like you said. We've been kind of collabing on some stuff for almost 6 months, and the off season it's come and gone way too quickly. Feel like I've touched on a lot of things, but there's still definitely a lot of work to do, and excited to get into it today.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with an overview of just where these teams stand from a win total futures perspective. So we have it on the screen here, but for those listening, you got the Saints at 9.5 wins, the Falcons at 8.5 wins, Panthers 7.5 wins, Bucks at the caboose 6.5 wins. So all very tight. And also, I mean, really, as I opened, a very mid division. So, there's no 4-game winners. There's no 10, 11-game winners. All kind of like bunched up there in the middle. Again, very tightly priced. Does anything kind of stick out to you? And also, I should have opened with, we do have an asterisk here from Steven that he is a Panthers homer. So just note that, filter his feelings about the Panthers to that. But he's academically honest. So I think he'll be able to balance that.
There's definitely a little bit of bias, and I more want to talk about the other 3 teams. I feel like the Saints as division favorites, that's a little off. I think they actually got worse than they were last year, and we're going to see a lot of regression. And the same's probably true for the Buccaneers. Those teams, I think, are definitely going to be towards the bottom of the division, and this is going to be between the Falcons and Panthers down the stretch.
Yeah, I disagree on the Saints. I think actually they should be bigger favorites, and I absolutely love the division bet for the Saints more so than any of the over-unders. And honestly, I don't hate a Panthers under 6.5, even a Bucks under 5.5. Both of those are
fighting words.
Yeah, obviously. I also would take the under of the Falcons. That's certainly where I lean. I'm not sure how I feel about the alt under. We can get into reasons for that. I think this is worse than a mid-division of football. I think this is going to be an absolute disaster of a division, with the exception of the Saints, and maybe the Falcons can kind of sneak around. But I think the Bucks and Panthers have possibilities of being among the worst teams in the league.
Okay, so there's a taste of some of our views. For me, I would say, at least at this point in time, I'm still early in my research as well. again, we've been doing a lot of kind of like macro-oriented research, a lot of building from a Sportfolio Kings perspective. We're going to be delivering and talking about and have tools this season, unlike anything that we had last season. Game trade is going to be chef's kiss, awesome shit. So a lot to look forward to there. But when it comes to the actual like researching the teams themselves and things that have actually happened over the offseason, as I was putting together some of these slides, I was like, oh, wow. Like, I didn't know Adam Thielen was on the Panthers. So still kind of like figuring a lot of that out. But, you know, I've been listening to other podcasts as well. And another cool tool that we're going to have that actually will help us do this more seamlessly, more efficiently, and more quantitatively is our sentiment analyzers. We're going to be able to scrape the transcripts and then actually assess how the speakers talk about teams, quantify it from a sentiment analysis perspective using natural language processing, machine learning, artificial intelligence to be able to do that, and then do it in aggregate. So we don't have to listen to every single 45-minute podcast. We can aggregate it all together. We have our market consensus power rankings. We have betting splits. We have other aspects of understanding how the market positions around teams. And this is going to be another new alternative data point. We've already previewed a little bit of it on Twitter, but that's something we're going to continue to share over the course of the season, looking at other people's podcasts, analyzing it, quantifying it. And when I've done that from a few tests already, it seems pretty unanimous that there's a lot of bettors out there that really like the Falcons. So the Falcons seems like a very hot trade. And then the opposite side of that spectrum is from my experience so far, everyone wants to sell the already sold off Bucks, trying to sell them at the bottom. And so for me, just from a broader like market positioning perspective, I don't see the potential upside in Falcons as much as others do. I'm lukewarm on the Saints. And I think the best opportunity here is probably in what would we see on the screen here as like the somewhat of bottom dwellers in the Panthers and Bucks. That's how I'm seeing it. I see like the Bucks could definitely get over 6.5, could definitely get over 7.5. And then the Panthers, if they didn't have Bryce Young and there was like more certainty at quarterback, I would like them even more so. I would have them as probably division win.
I'm just excited for Brett, you to kind of look back in about an hour from now and be like, man, did I really say that I like the Bucks at over?
Wow, only just an hour from now, and you're gonna think that you're wrong already. I think I have low conviction, so it could happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have on the screen here is now as we start to dive in, we'll start with looking back. All right, what happened in 2022? Remind ourselves. I know a lot of people are already coming out with preview podcasts. We're a little late in the game, so I'm sure everyone's probably maybe familiar with this, but we're doing it for ourselves. And also, we're going to analyze it from a different perspective. No one has the charts we have. No one analyzes the data the way we do. Everyone just pontificates. All right, we're actually going to be like showing you stuff. So on this slide, we talk about the range of outcomes. And one thing we're also going to be doing a lot this season is using EDP. So our custom metric from our drive quality metric, earn drive points, certainly using that more so rather than EPA. Judah, maybe you want to talk a little about this.
Yeah, sure. So earn drive points is kind of exactly how it sounds, which is how many points do you earn on a drive? What does it mean to earn points? Essentially, how sustainable or reproducible is your drive, which is to say like a 75-yard touchdown off a blown coverage is not the same as a 10-play drive where you kind of march up and down the field. That is kind of more sticky. If we're going to predict future performance, I'd rather put stock in kind of that 10-play drive. So that's essentially what earn drive points is. It kind of builds in a bunch of different features. I recommend checking that article out. It is on our site, sportfoliokings.com. But the basic idea is how well does the team move the ball and how reproducible and sustainable is that? And that is helpful to predict kind of in the future how teams will move the ball. This range of outcomes chart is using a Bayesian framework to basically say and understand the distributions of that. So it's one thing to kind of get a mean or a sum for a particular week. This kind of paints a picture of what is the high percentile outcome, right? If you look at the peak, let's say, of the Falcons, they kind of start from a different point, meaning that their peak is about like the Bucs median, and they have a fatter right tail, which means that they have a higher distribution, and have a propensity to score more points. So it kind of paints a picture of the distribution, basically.
Yeah, and that's what you want to look at. This is the type of charts that we'll definitely be leveraging a lot over the course of the season to try to understand what teams do you want to potentially bet high leverage situations, high leverage potential outcomes, tail scenarios for. So like in this type of scenario, like it wouldn't really necessarily pay off, be like, yeah, maybe you want to be, a little cute, a little cheeky and try to bet on the Panthers to like outperform to the upside. Well, this is basically just saying like, that's probably not a great bet. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But if you really want to roll the dice on a potential upside outperformance, this is something you might want to like, hey, maybe the Saints, maybe the Falcons. And in fact, what this is also telling you is, hey, in fact, maybe you might want to roll the dice on a potential downside underperformance from the Panthers. Hey, maybe they only score 3 points in the game. Maybe some alt unders or something like that. This is the types of ways that you can use a chart like this, something we'll definitely be using a lot over the course of the season. So let's start into the Tampa Bay Bucks, a team that we made a lot of money on last season. One of the charts that we'll show after this really demonstrates and quantifies this. But we'll first start with, again, earned drive points, where the Bucks stood relative to the broader league. And we can see here that they had, their defense wasn't trash, that, it was definitely in, the
very good,
a top fourth tier. But also their offense was very bad. Anything that you want to take away from this, Judah?
Yeah, I think this just kind of crystallizes just how bad the offense was. I think Tom Brady was fine, and we'll kind of discuss the ramifications of that for this upcoming season. But this offense was in line with basically the Patriots and Giants and Rams by our quality. Even the Bears had a better offense by our marking, and the Saints too. This was not a particularly good unit. I think this kind of really shows and hammers that point home.
They suffered a lot of interior offensive line injuries early on in the season, and you saw that impact Brady's kind of performance and the overall efficiency of that offense. I think they're only going to get worse because they lost Donovan Smith this year, Shaq Mason, and of course Tom Brady. So when you're looking at a bunch of new guys on that interior O-line and Baker Mayfield at quarterback, all of a sudden the efficiency that was kind of there with Brady, I think, is completely gone, and the floor is kind of given out.
Mm-hmm. Well, that definitely does seem like how a lot of people are evaluating the Bucs going into 2023. And we can see in 2022, the market has just really flipped. Now everyone's very quick to sell the Bucs. And last year, it took them forever to come around to understanding how bad the Bucs actually were. We see all the way up through about week 6, week 7, they were still ranked as a top 3 team when it was very clear that they weren't. So what we're showing here on the screen, what we'll be showing on future screens for future teams, is we have here on the line with all the teams that the Bucs played, what the score was, whether they covered or not. And this is a general market consensus power rank. So this is an equal weighted average of how PFF, how ESPN, how 538, how Football Outsiders, and how Impredict was ranking the team on a week-by-week basis, and then seeing how that changed week over week over the course of the season. What we have new on here is our drive quality model market power rankings, which we leveraged last season, that we talked about on every single week's market outlook. And one of the things that we would kept pounding the table on every single week is about how the Bucs continued to be overrated, and we can see how ahead of market drive quality was. By week 4, the Bucs were already a bottom
13th,
where it was ranked 14th. Yeah, 13th, 14th. A few weeks later, by week 7, week 8, all the way down to almost 20th. By week 13, almost touching 25. as literally one of the worst teams in the league. And in fact, by the end of the season, drive quality actually started to peak back up and say, hey, maybe the team's like not that bad, while the market continued to sell off on the team. And you can see that the market dripped lower and lower, closer and closer to drive quality, as drive quality was ahead by double-digit amount of weeks. And this is the type of insight, the type of forecasting that you need, that you want as a sports bettor to give you forward-looking, actionable advice. And this is us here. We're demonstrating exactly that. So again, something that you're going to want to listen to over the course of 2023, how is drive quality evaluating these teams? And this is a great insight of basically giving you free future forecasting, time machine almost here.
Yeah, I'll even just add, and in case it's not clear, I hope it is after this. Right, talked about in the note of like understanding drive quality and earn drive points. It's that it's at its best sourcing short-term information, and there is no better example than the Tampa Bay Bucs of last year. And this is something we constantly were betting on last year. It worked from, I'm looking here. I remember the live bet on the Panthers, which they lost 21-3. I remember so many of these, and that
was a big turning point.
That was a big turning point. And I think just seeing just how far ahead, drive quality was. And it kind of like peaked back as the Bucs put together a couple of performances. And I think it's honest in that way, but really was ahead. And there's no better example of the short-term signal that, earned drive points and drive quality has than the Bucs of last year.
Yep. And it's not romanced by superficial results, because you look at week 1 and week 2. Okay. The Bucs started off 2-0 and started off 2-0 ATS. So they're actually making bettors money, but drive quality sees through that bullshit and sees and understands how the team's actually performing on the field. And drive quality was selling off on the Bucs even as they won the games, even as they covered the spreads. And just so often, one of the things I just hate so much about sports bettors and power rankings in general is they're just so reactive. They just react to whatever the most recent thing that happened. And they react directionally with whatever happened, which essentially provides you no insight beyond just broader sentiment, which is why we still capture that information, because it's good to understand, well, how does the market, how does the media, how do talking heads feel about this team? Because then they influence broader bettors and how they allocate their bankrolls. So that's why we want to make sure that we understand that. And then also we can understand, all right, how does drive quality feel about this team relative to the market? Because then that's obviously going to give you a sense of how something might be mispriced or not. So this next slide, again, for just diving a little bit deeper into that team's 2022 performance, this breaks it down on a week-by-week basis, really gives you more granular insight into how the spread moved, how much did they not cover by, how did they perform in game. So we have some unique metrics here. We have max lead, max deficit. So how did they perform intra-game? Did they get hot? Did they get cold? Did they make a comeback? Did they collapse? We have time-weighted average margin, TWAM, which is a time-weighted evaluation of how much they led or how much they were losing by, multiplied by the time that they held that lead or how much they were losing by. So it can give you a more accurate sense of how competitive they were in that game. This will not be manipulated by a last-minute score, or a last-minute score and then a pick six and a 3-point game turns into a 17-point game. And the final score looks like one team blew the other team out, when that's not at all what happened. TWAM is going to tell you exactly how that game was actually very competitive. So TWAM can give you a better sense, especially when you're looking back and maybe you forgot some of these nuanced details, can help give you a better, more accurate sense of, evaluating those past games. And we also have a similar metric, TWAP, which is the time-weighted average win probability. Again, same philosophy. And then we have the bet percentage, cash percentage. Some people are skeptical of those. Well, if you are, we also have the Circa rank. So where did this team rank from a picks perspective in the Circa Millions contest? That's real data. That's fact. So that is just another metric that we can use to help understand broader, better positioning, broader market positioning. How were they feeling this team on a week-by-week basis Did they think that this team was likely going to win or cover? And we can see on this with the Bucs specifically, we can see that they were a top pick in Circa. In fact, it's a great example of what we're talking about, how drive quality doesn't get romanced by superficial outcomes. We see the Circa rank in week 1 and week 2. When the Bucs won and covered, they were actually not a popular pick in Circa. Week 1, 25th ranked pick. Week 2, 15th ranked pick. So they're 2-0 against ATS. Now the market warms up to them. Now the market wants to start betting the Bucs, and you're fucking late. You're late to the game. Circa rank 9th, 12th, 1st, 3rd, 3rd over the next 5 weeks. So the market is romanced. The market gets taken for a sucker by this team. And this is just these are just great examples of just how you can kind of use these types of charts when you're evaluating these teams. Anything kind of stick out to you guys from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Bucs in particular, they're and I think the reason why we're focusing so much on using this as a general example about drive quality is that, like, obviously this team's going to look very different because they don't have Tom Brady, and that's a huge loss, and we'll get into that when we talk about the offseason changes. Again, it's to your point about just how long the market held. This team was not an underdog in a game until week 14. Right, like it really goes to show the narrative of the Bucs, and like that's kind of irrelevant for making money next year. Except there's probably going to be another team that comes in with huge expectations, really is underperforming. We're like, oh, are they going to turn around? They're going to turn around, and let the Bucs be a cautionary tale. Like this could go on till week 14, where like you'll hold on to priors. Granted, it's Tom Brady. Okay, fine, whatever. The point is that like, there's going to be some team that is well below expectations, and I hope that we're ahead of the market there. It's going to happen.
Yeah, no, there's a shelf life for certain teams. We saw that last year with the Bucs and the Colts and some of these older teams. And if injuries and stuff happens, it can derail it. And EDP was reflecting of that. It caught that, and where a lot of people thought there'd be market correction or they'd be able to pick it up, they really weren't able to. But there were a couple blips in the previous graph where you saw that they were starting to make runs down the stretch, but to no avail. It really didn't amount to anything as they got blown out in the first week of the playoffs.
Yeah.
So many.
Yeah, and another thing that we saw is again, the max. If we look at the max deficits, I mean, the Bucs are just getting their faces ripped off week in and week out. Down by 11, down by 21, down by 8, down by 18, down by 11, down by 13, down by 35, down by 17, down by 10, down by 14, down by 13. They're down double digits almost every single game. And again, as we showed on this chart, despite all that happening, they were ranked as a top 10 team all the way through week 14 before the market finally started to soften on them.
Yeah, the TUM numbers are striking. Lots of, -6, -12, -6, -2, -21, and then just like they've got 2 wins of more than 7. Just not a great season. Which I'm going to take back what I said. I think that there is a lot to learn from last season, which is like this roster was bad as it is, and I think that kind of shows up. And like Tom Brady was probably the thing keeping it together. We'll talk about this more in I guess 5 minutes. Maybe I'll start now with the offseason changes. This roster was dreadful. Tom Brady, and I think the key stat here was getting rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds, which was by far the quickest in the NFL. The guy in second place, Joe Burrow, was 2.5 seconds, which kind of mitigated the offensive line and how weak they were. As a unit now, they project as one of the worst units, if not the worst unit in the NFL. Just like looking at their offensive line, just using Tristan Wirfs, a great left tackle. If you even just look at their PFF grades, like you've got a 46, a rookie 28.9, a 54.6. These are all bottom third, if not worse, in the league. Add in the fact that Baker Mayfield is a guy who holds on to the ball for too long. His pressure to sack ratio, meaning when he sees a pressure, how often is he taking a sack? He's 30%, which is like 7% more than the second place team. That's a disastrous combo. Add in the fact that it's a new offensive coordinator. But this team was throwing into perfect coverage, meaning a combination of their receivers' lack of separation, the lack of offensive creativity, and in the defenses they're playing certainly plays a role in that. But they were doing it almost 50% of the time. Your base rate of success there is horrible. It's a negative 0.3 EPA. That's almost 2 times worse than the worst offense in the NFL last season. I'm just not sure what they have on offense. It's like a bad offensive line, a quarterback who holds the ball for too long. Oh, by the way, like maybe Chris Godwin comes back. He's on the decline. Mike Evans' separation numbers have gone way down. He's, getting into his 30s, I believe, at this point. There's really nothing on offense here. It was a bad unit last year. The team didn't play last year. They probably overperformed their 8-9 record, and they just lost the one thing that was keeping them together, which is Tom Brady.
You hit the head on the nail.
Steven, what do we know? Do you know anything about this new OC? So
Dave Cannell's
knows a ton of information about coaching analytics, play calling, post some awesome stuff on that.
Dave Cannell's, I don't have too much on. I think he's a significant downgrade to
Byron Leftwich.
And
oh, damn, this is dumpster fire then.
Yeah, so you have a dumpster fire on that. You've lost in essence like 2 starters on that offensive line that were key last year. So you need Wirfs to literally man down the left side while you have like a second-year guy and a rookie on your right-hand side. Like you said, Baker holds on to the ball so long. He had a top 10 offensive line in Carolina. And exactly like you were pointing out, Judah, he rolls out, I can't tell you how many times. He does not know how to play in structure. And that's going to hurt him here in Tampa Bay when, like you said, Mike Evans is 29 years old. Chris Godwin is 27 years old. They aren't getting any younger, and it's looking pretty bleak.
Yeah, and those wide receivers, I mean, they can look one way one year, and then one offseason can just fall off a cliff. Dan asks, what do you think the Bucs' record is last year without Brady?
3-14.
Well, they were 4-12 and 1 ATS, so definitely sounds about right. So let's look into 2023 and see who they play. So we're looking at, again, from the futures perspective, 6.5. Again, it's like basically not juiced on either side, so VIG adjusted, also 6.5 wins. Strength of schedule is from a futures implied perspective. So this can still like be kicked around, and the realized strength of schedule can end up being totally different. But at least from a futures implied perspective, it's kind of right down the middle, 16th. Net rest, -6 days. So that's a disadvantage. Mean spread is about +3.5. So on average, are about a field goal underdog over the course of the season. The Pythag 2.0 model would say it likes the over here.
Yeah, it doesn't know Tom Brady's retired.
It doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
I think if we want to look for a silver lining with this team, because I don't think it's going to be on the offensive side. You showed on the list prior that they lost Akeem Hicks, but they also added Greg Gaines in free agency, and they drafted Kalijah Cansey. You pair that with Vita Vea and Shaq Barrett that's already there. That's what's going to keep them in games, because that's what's going to allow Levante David and Devin White to do what they do best. It's going to allow Antonio Winfield, Carlton Davis, and Jamal Dean to kind of hold up that back end and make plays back there. So if they're going to stick around, it's going to be because of the defense, not because what they're doing offensively.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. So, I mean, there's a lot of the defense is coming back.
It is. And it looks great. Like when you see Hakeem Hicks leave, they reinforce the interior with getting Greg Gaines from LA, who I think is great, super underrated. And then Kalijah Cansey, who is kind of reminiscent of Aaron Donald. His arms are a little bit shorter, but he's that smaller, more explosive interior defensive lineman, and he could wreak some havoc in Tampa.
Bold Aaron Donald predictions. I'm just
reminiscent. Yeah,
I just wonder, I mean, like how much. So the defense was over pretty good, as we talked about, and we can see that on the chart here from an EDP perspective. And obviously it was a bad offense. I think how much worse can it be?
They aren't going to be able to run the ball.
I mean, they didn't score any points versus the Panthers for like 3 quarters.
Yeah, first off, I don't think the defense will be as good just from a regression standpoint, right? This is probably a top 5 defense by, EDP. They still lost a bunch of guys. They're also a relatively old defense. Guys like Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, they're not getting younger. Shaq Barrett's not getting younger.
No.
Look, I mean, they could be propped up by their schedule, could win a bunch of grinder games, but like, there's also a difference with Tom Brady going down to win fourth quarter drives and 17, 16 games against the Saints versus like Baker Mayfield doing it. And yes, Baker Mayfield had that wonderful game-winning drive against the Raiders last year, but the point is that the defense, yes, can probably keep them in games, but this might be the worst offense in the league.
It just seems so like hard to actually imagine with I understand like what you're talking about and like Baker Mayfield's weaknesses, his history of underperforming versus questionable offensive lines, slow and poor decision making. But I also feel like these are some of the best weapons at his disposal, even if Mike Evans and Godwin, etc., are on the back halves of their careers. I mean, he had nothing going for him in LA with the Rams. I don't know. I could see it being real, like the offense being total crap, but being one of the worst offenses. Like, I just feel like that's what everyone is saying. Like, there's like a very strong consensus view of the Bucs. And pretty much everyone always says like, oh, well, they do still have this and they do still have this and they do have these players on defense and these still have like pretty decent wide receivers, but Baker Mayfield sucks, so the whole team sucks. My biggest worry of why that would potentially keep me off actually betting the upside of the Bucs is coaching. So what you just said about the OC, Steven, and then just Bowles in general. Like
I think he's look at the schedule right here. Let's go. I don't think they beat Minnesota in week 1. Chicago's revamped. They're definitely not beating Philly. The Saints is going to be a grinded out division game. They're probably going to get blown out by the Lions and the Bills. Does Todd Bowles even hold his position past week 8? That was going to be my prediction, is that I don't think he lasts the season. But looking at the schedule, if you fall to like 2-6 at that point, the offense looks abysmal. Like at that point, you're firing Todd Bowles, you're trading Mike Evans, and you're playing for Caleb Williams or Drake May. Like that's what it's going to boil down to if it gets ugly fast.
Yeah, I also think there's a tank variable here, which is a non-zero chance this team has absolutely no intention of winning. And Baker Mayfield is the perfect stopgap quarterback. That lends itself, I think, to a mid-season futures. If you see them kind of lose, the first 3, I don't know if the fewest win market will be available then, but I think you'd be able to get some live over-under bets because if the wheels start coming off, Steven, as you say, this can go off really quick.
Well, we see on the screen fewest wins, Bucs plus 800. I definitely do agree in the sense of it when you're thinking about tail potential outcomes. There is a fat tail for this team to be one of the worst teams in the league, given every single thing that you just talked about. I wish that they were already making some of those changes now. Like, I wish they were like, why aren't they actively trying to trade like Mike Evans or Godwin right now?
Because his price is going to go up middle of the season. So remember when the Rams were making a push for the Super Bowl, they traded Von Miller and they traded a second for him. So it's a team desperate enough.
Get someone desperate, yeah.
Exactly. And so that's you're going to get a higher pick because of that. You're going to be able to offload salary. And at that point, you've already taken on some because you've had them a couple of games into the season. So I think it just works out for both sides.
I think they're delusional, but that's the organization. They think they're just good. And
that could also be true.
Team.
Dan also points out Bucs got 40 to 50 million in dead cap this year.
That's it.
Yikes. Let's move on to the Panthers. So we're looking at their offensive and defensive EDB chart. Again, kind of like in line with the Bucs there, and that's why they actually ended up flirting with the division title near the end of the year there. I had, I don't know, maybe in like week 10 or 11 or something like that, I took like a lottery ticket bet on the Panthers to potentially win the division. I can't remember what it was. It was like
25-1. Why do I remember your bet?
If I And it came very close. And in fact, remember, I was in Paris when the Panthers really hit their peak and then collapsed versus the Bucs. They had like a double-digit lead on them. I'm like, my God, this ticket is gonna win. Plus, I like the Panthers. The Panthers are gonna make the playoffs. They're gonna sneak in. Plus, the Bucs suck. They're gonna lose again. Oh my gosh, it's like everything's coming together, and then it all collapsed.
We couldn't cover Mike Evans that game. CJ Henderson was the starter on that side, and they just torched us on go routes. That was the epitome of that game. It was awful.
Yeah.
That was the coming to fruition of like just a short glimpse of what people thought the Bucs were going to be doing like all season. But as we can see on the EDP chart here, the Panthers were right there in like the same kind of range of the Bucs. A pretty elite defense and a miserable offense. So this is the type of thing where if the Panthers can actually come around and put together a decent offense, obviously they had quarterback trouble up and down and different quarterbacks changing places. So that's obviously going to disrupt really any sort of offensive flow. And it seems like there should be more stability there. When we look at the Panthers 2022 power ranking volatility, we could see their average rank was about 28th. The average opponent rank that they played was about 16th. 7-day rolling rank volatility was about 4.5 spots. So in any given week, they were up or down 4.5 spots, the way that the market was kind of like evaluating them. We can see they started off around 28th, had a spike, and then came down lower. And this is just another chart that we saw that rhymes a lot with what we saw Judah last season. And I think maybe we'll see it again as we kind of continue to roll through some of these teams, but that there's this kind of initial preseason understanding of how good a team potentially is. And then there's a bunch of noise kind of in between, but they kind of end up relatively close to where people thought they were going to be, but people abandon like relatively quickly sometimes those narratives. And then oftentimes they hold on to the ones that are definitely wrong, like the Bucs. But we can see here that there wasn't too much volatility with the Panthers over the course of the year. There was a little bit of a belief at the beginning of the year, then a sell-off, and then kind of just a general trickle around 32nd, 31st, 30th. Drive quality was always, as we can see here, a little bit hotter on them than the market was. And we can see the drive quality actually does lead the market ever so slightly. But wasn't a great kind of leading indicator here for like really cashing tickets. And we didn't really end up betting the Panthers too much last season.
Yeah. I mean, I love you obviously pointing at the kind of intra-volatility here, but also I love this chart. It's a great reminder of a classic expectation of a team. They're actually a little better. Oh no, they're as bad as we thought. And then right at that bottom, you have that game against the Bucs, where they're power ranked at 31st or 32nd. We're like, okay, they're as bad as we thought they were in the preseason, and that's always when the team kind of goes on a little run, or at least is better than that 32nd ranking. And we saw that here, beating the Bucs, and then a 3-point loss against the Falcons, and then they do get crushed by the Bengals, but then rattle off a bunch of wins. That's a classic spot right there of the buying the dip, I guess, for lack of a better term there.
Well, buying the dip, it was the firing of Matt Rule. After the 49ers abysmal game, he goes, you see Steve Wilkes take over as the interim guy, and they go into LA with PJ Walker, and they definitely take the L there. But after that, you just saw them buy into it, and that's what happens when you have competent coaching, which I think is what David Tepper leaned into this offseason, is making sure he had one of the best, if not the best, coaching staff available to him.
And what I actually really like here is like, this is a really good example of drive quality basically being exactly 1 week ahead of the market. You can see drive quality shoots up a week before the market shoots up and then sells off hard on the Panthers a full week before the market sells off on the Panthers. So that's exactly what you kind of want to see, again, from any sort of true leading indicator that gives you kind of tactical insight into how to position around a team. And we can see here also, drive quality isn't always necessarily intended to be an indicator of a broader, longer term macro view, it can be volatile in itself. But like Judah talked about as well, it can actually have a lot of power using it as a short term signal of how to evaluate this team on that 1 to 3 week window. When we look at the week to week in the X-ray here, we can see again, like drive quality, never really loved it too much, always kind of still in the red there. We see a lot of volatility at the quarterback position. Mayfield started the first kind of 5 weeks. Who was
PJ
here?
Walker. That was
Okay,
that was
gotcha.
PJ Walker. So yeah, you're good.
Yeah, PJ Walker. I think the code here is take the next chunk of text after a space, and that's the J. Then we had PJ Walker, then we had Mayfield, then we had Darnold to end the season, and he actually did wear a little bit of a Superman cape and start to bring some life to this team.
Yeah, I was gonna say, got to highlight those Darnold performances there.
He's not bad. He's
not bad.
Well, I mean,
Sniper, if he gets the opportunity in SF, we'll see what happens.
I think he was pretty bad. I think he had a really good season. I think probably his best. I mean, his like average EPA was 0.23. Pretty good. The turnover where he plays were really low. It's 2% of his dropbacks, and averaging like 8.5 yards per attempt. Like he was good, which is kind of strange because he kind of assumed that it's like when a guy has a resurgence like that, it's probably system based. But I don't think Steve Wilks' offensive system is really. I'm just saying,
he had a full offseason in the Ben McAdoo system that we had installed, and Ben McAdoo stayed. But yeah, exactly.
The Ben McAdoo system is not exactly getting me all excited. But I think it just underscores a couple of things. Number one, a quarterback in the short term can string together a bunch of good games. Brett, I know you love talking about Darnold's ability to string together some big games, and also that kind of, as you said, Steven, like coaching matters, environment matters, and this is clearly a team that bought in and improved their performance, even though the EPA, I think, is one of those things where sometimes you can kind of attribute to the quarterback. Other times it's a lot to the context. I think this is more of an example of where the context kind of elevates the quarterback a little bit. And I think that kind of gets to your point about the coaching and the environment.
Absolutely. No, I think Darnold's going to actually do really well in his new home in San Francisco. I think the biggest thing that's always been Darnold's fault is that he doesn't process well, but he can throw a damn good ball. So I think in that context, if Kyle Shanahan can just simply have him point and shoot, he's going to look really, really good if he has to play this year.
Yeah, I like that point.
What I think is also interesting here is, and this is one of the things that, I want to more actively use these types of charts, not just in a look back kind of season preview perspective, but also on a week to week basis more so this year. Because these are the types of things that I look at. So like, again, trying to understand like a typical traditional contrarian signal, using the market as a contrarian signal. All right. So like I'm looking at like the Panthers, again, generally not a great team. If anything, like best case scenario was like kind of in the middle, an average kind of team. When the market buys into them, all right, so if they're a top 10 circa pick, week 1, 7th ranked pick, week 2, 6th ranked pick, both times fail to cover, 0-2. Market sells off on them. Now the third week, again, we're 0-2, we're butthurt, not betting Panthers anymore. Fuck the Panthers. 21st ranked pick. Oh, of course, then they cover. Then they cover by a full touchdown as the market sells off on them. But market buys into them again a few weeks later, gets to be a top 10 pick. All right, maybe we'll start to flirt with the Panthers again. Oh, they lose. They don't cover by 21 points. Market's pissed again, not betting the Panthers anymore. Next week, 28th ranked pick. Oh, and then they cover by double digits. So as soon as the market sells off, again, a few weeks later, takes a while for the market to buy back in the Panthers, buys back in the Panthers, the 3rd ranked pick. Don't cover by 8 points. And sells off, now another back to 11th, and then they cover by 2 touchdowns. And it's just this type of aspect of when the market tries to get clever and buys into a team that's not very good. And then when they try to sell off hard on them, creates opportunity. I think another thing that I thought was interesting when I'm looking at the max lead, max deficits here is pretty much any time that the Panthers took a considerable lead, they held it. And in fact, sometimes like it was a decisive win. So when they took a 15-point lead versus the Saints, they never trailed, and they ended up winning. 18-point lead, never trailed, ended up winning. 13-point lead. Once they got to that double-digit lead, never trailed, ended up being the Falcons. 20-point lead, never trailed. 17-point lead, never trailed. 24-point lead, never trailed. Only this last one, actually, versus the Bucs, that the one we were just talking about, had a 14-point lead, blew it, ended up going down by 9, ended up losing. But that was really the only other time, any other time. And so these are the types of like rhythms that you want to start to recognize in the season, especially, Judah, like for us, when you're thinking about live betting.
Yeah.
Trying to understand what teams are stickier once they get those leads, and it's harder to kind of give it up, and which teams are more vulnerable.
I was I was just thinking about this today. I don't know. I was driving and I was like, I should, put together a chart. It's my favorite of like how you perform on offense when you have a comfortable lead. And it's like the Vikings for the last bunch of years have always been in the bottom left.
Oh, yeah.
I was actually just thinking about that today. I'll make one more general point about the Panthers. Again, it's going to be funny. None of these teams have quarterbacks that played for them last year. So the 22 season performance is going to be, I guess, a little more general than I think it will be in future weeks. But the run game here is where I think that the Panthers really leaned into, especially late in the season. And exactly your point about their ability to kind of hold leads, which is like this team got leads. They ran the ball effectively and did not let teams back in. They ran few plays because they were able to control the clock. And that's kind of a path, I guess. Again, it's a totally different system with Frank Reich here, so there isn't so much to say about the Panthers. But for another team, perhaps, that might be able to win 7 games or 8 games or 9 games, whatever it is, just on the backs of like having a good run game that can kind of win you these floor games where you get out to a lead and you just hold it. Keep away, and like that happens, and you can kind of variance your way to a better record than probably your fundamental value is. I think the Panthers, yes, it only ended up in 7 wins. It could have been 8, it could have been 9, whatever it is. I think that's a perfect example of a team that's not going to have ceiling, but can kind of steal a bunch of games on the backs of a run game, and a team that can protect leads.
Yeah, Panthers 9-8 ATS. Something we'll talk about a lot over the course of the season also is active points. A key attribute to what feeds our Pythag 2 model, which we've demonstrated has more predictiveness than your traditional Pythag. We have a note on that on sportfoliokings.com. Check it out. But active points is something that we're going to talk about a lot this season. And active points is basically just how many points does the offense score more so than what the betting markets assume that they're going to score. And then how many points does the defense give up less than the betting markets assume that they'll end up giving up. And of course, each one of those would be the team outperforming betting markets. And that would be your collective total active points. And so total active points for the Panthers last year, plus 38. So again, another signal just saying how this team was kind of habitually undervalued, mispriced last season. So when we talk about the offseason changes, of course, Bryce Young, Frank Reich, we know this. Adam Thielen. I didn't know that until about an hour ago. So maybe others potentially listening out there. This team has Adam Thielen. Does it matter? I don't know. Judah says no. Miles Sanders and DJ Chark. I always like DJ Chark if he gets it healthy. Of course, lost DJ Moore, Matt Ioannidis, Corey Littleton. Again, we have the local Panthers fan. Steven, is there anything else I missed here from the offseason perspective that you want to bring out?
So I do want to go on a run. As someone who loves kind of coaching backgrounds and whatnot, we not only brought in Frank Reich, we brought in Thomas Brown from Sean McVay's tree. He's our offensive coordinator, so you get a little touch of that. We retained James Campen, who was a huge part of us having a top 10 O-line, which paved the way for the running game that allowed us to hold on the leads. We retained all 5 starters. We retained him as a coach. We added some more depth this offseason. So that looks to be a strong suit, and that's what's going to keep Bryce Young up in the pocket and finding guys and making tight window throws. Because like you alluded to, this wide receiving core isn't anything to write home about. Really happy about Deuce Staley. We got him from the Detroit Lions. He's a running back coach and assistant coach. Really just going to blow the doors off. Like, he's one of those guys that he brings energy to the locker room, and that's what you need. And then a former quarterback and a guy who's acted like a quarterback coach when he's been a quarterback on rosters is Josh McCown. So when you look at that offensive staff and what they're going to be able to generate, yeah, we don't have a lot of firepower on offense, but I think they're going to be really smart in putting us in the best position possible to make plays and win games.
Yeah, one of the things Dan was just asking about too was Panthers O-line. One of the things we're going to do here in the next week or so is put together our consensus market power rankings around offensive line. So kind of survey the field, how various kind of different, fantasy and sports betting and other kind of media platforms are evaluating and ranking offensive lines and try to understand how the market as a whole is evaluating offensive lines. That was like really helpful last offseason. We'll do it again this offseason. But not really knowing what that number is where would you rank the Panthers kind of offensive line?
I would say it's definitely fringe top 10. I think if everybody stays healthy, we're waiting for Austin Corbett to get back. But, I mean, the interior looks great with Bradley Bozeman. We have an all-pro right tackle in Taylor Moton and our left tackle, Ike Ekwonu, who we drafted, I believe, in the top 10 last year. He played really, really well. And I only think he's going to play better with another year under his belt.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly true of the development of tackles in general, struggling in the first year. But, Steven, I want to get back to your point. I think it's excellent that they brought in all this staff. I think it makes the case for a bullish long-term view of the Panthers, and I'm willing to be there in year 2 or year 3, depending on how Bryce Young plays. I'm
100%.
not sure how that translates in year 1. And that's for a number of reasons. Number one, familiarity in the system for anyone is going to get better from year 1 to year 2. And also, I don't see the talent there. Like, you can have all of the coaching in the world, and I guess if you hit on some unicorn here and you've got like a Ben Johnson leading the Lions, it's possible. I think that it presents a case for upside that I probably was not willing to consider before. But ultimately, what this comes down to is, I think that rookie quarterbacks are not generally good. And if you look back at like the most successful rookie seasons, I have in front of me rookie seasons from like 2015. You've got like Dak Prescott, who was a complete unicorn in that he was drafted into a basically.
But what did he have? He had a great offensive line. He had a great running game, and he had a couple receivers. That's all he needed.
Yeah, that was all he needed. Like, that's most teams, right? He was a 3rd or 4th round pick. Wasn't supposed to start. He just got thrust into it. That is, I think, a unique situation. And then you've got like Deshaun Watson and Justin Herbert had good rookie years, and then basically no one else has. Like the highest EPA after that is like Mac Jones at 0.85, which also a guy drafted into a pretty good system. That's not the same for Bryce Young this year, right? Like, the receivers are not of that caliber. I'm just saying what gives me pause about the team. And like, I totally buy the long-term case. And like, I'd like to see some signs of progress for Bryce Young. And I think that's kind of what the Panthers are going for this year. But just Absolutely. Like the base rate of even good who will be good quarterbacks in the future. It's just the rookie years are probably not going to be that good. And he doesn't have the talent on the field, I think, to kind of elevate his play enough.
The only thing to that point, and this is more just, it doesn't have to be anything more than this, is you referred to Ben Johnson, and we actually brought in DJ Chark to kind of be the guy that takes the top off the defenses. The role Jonathan Mingo is going to probably play, especially when you look at what he did at Ole Miss, is he's going to have crossers coming across the field, and he's going to play that Amon-Ra St. Brown role. And so if Chark can clear stuff, you have Hurst and Thielen as just simply security blankets on those money downs. If you can get Mingo out in space, he has a better relative athletic score than DK Metcalf and AJ Brown. And both of those guys put up about 50 catches, about 900 yards, about 6-7 touchdowns rookie year. And if you can get that kind of production from Mingo, then all of a sudden, some of the pieces around you, maybe you do make that wild card push and win the division.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Ambitious.
It is ambitious. I think there are a lot of ifs there, and like I see the potential for upside more so than I do the Bucks. I don't think how you can talk me into a bullish Bucks case. I just think like it's important in kind of handicapping the Panthers to understand the base rate. Not to say that they can't kind of exceed that expectation, but where should this expectation be? And I think it's a team that is clearly lacking in wide receiver talent, even if Mingo's good. Like, it's still a bottom unit. Rookie quarterbacks, I don't care who they are, and Bryce Young is certainly not a generational prospect by any stretch of the imagination. The base rate should be, and the expectation should be, this team is not going to be very good on offense.
I do think the Panthers have, more upside than the Bucks if everything breaks right. Because actually, I think really I get the only thing that's going to be holding them back, right, is Bryce Young. I'm not bullish on Bryce Young. I didn't really like any of the rookie quarterbacks this year. I mean, I think Anthony Richardson, obviously, that's like a whole nother discussion. Like that, he could be like just an unbelievable game changer. That's like a whole separate story.
It is.
But Bryce Young, isn't Bryce Young supposedly 5'9"? And also, isn't Kyler Murray supposed to be 5'9"? If that's the case, like, I mean, first of all, Kyler Murray can't be 5'9" then. Because if they are both the same height, that means Bryce Young is a total midget.
He's definitely really small. And what I will say that lends himself more to a Kyler Murray or even a Russell Wilson is he seems to see the middle of the field pretty well, which I think is going to help him finding
move
guys.
Like them, right?
He's a little bit mobile, but no, he does not have that mobility. He's just good about getting the ball out of his hands and avoiding hits, which that's going to be the thing that keeps him alive, because you're exactly right. At 5'8", which he's probably at, he gets a couple licks. I mean, he's going to end up in the ER, and we'll be seeing a lot more Andy Dalton.
This is actually, and we talked about this, Brett, when we look back at the season previews, and we kind of realize that we have some general themes that we actually circle back to a lot when we're live betting or when we're previewing games. And this is a thought that comes to mind now, which is that like the skills that Bryce Young was good at in college, as you're alluding to, Stephen, the kind of ability to get the ball out to avoid hits, that might be a totally different ballgame in the NFL. In the same way that, like, I don't know why Justin Fields is the person that I think of who was like extremely accurate in college and his processing was probably pretty good. Yes, and I was like about his system, and he comes to the NFL and it's a totally different game. And it's like, if we see Bryce Young struggling early, I would not be surprised to see that prolonged, but also then there's a potential for kind of that swing after where he starts to learn towards the end of the season. And it's like Bryce Young might be priced in as like a disaster of a quarterback. He's really bad in his rookie season. And it wouldn't shock me if, like, by week 14, week 15, week 16, Bryce Young kind of turns it around a little bit, starts to, process better. He becomes more of the prospect that makes him the number one overall pick. Granted, I'm already talking through a, weird scenario here. I feel like it wouldn't be a good stream if I didn't. But that's something I can see to monitor, which is like, is that skill translating? Is the thing that made him the number one overall pick translating early? And kind of how can we capitalize that in the short term and the long term?
Well, I also wonder, like, to what extent will you be able to discern that? Dan also asked, like, do you think Bryce Young does much beyond just game managing? And so that's also like another, just like, to what extent, like, do you think that the coaching staff is going to be aggressive with Bryce Young? I mean, you have a good defense, you have a good offensive line, you ostensibly have a good running game. Like, that's a lot of strengths to lean on without having to, like, actively expose yourself to a rookie doing stupid things on the field. So I just wonder, like, do they use him as somewhat of a game manager, a dot of -2?
I think that's definitely going to be more of his role, especially coming in. He had one of the, I know it wasn't like officially leaked, but I think he was the guy that had the highest S2 score this past draft class. His processing's phenomenal. He picks up a playbook extremely fast. Like he pretty much ran Andy Dalton out of the starting gig before even training camp. And sometimes that doesn't happen with rookies to kind of supplant a veteran like that. But from coaches, from players, they knew this guy was it. And from that standpoint, I understand his physical abilities are definitely lacking. But from a mental standpoint, he seems to break down the game really, really well. And I think that's going to help him definitely at the next level.
That's fair. Well, let's look at the road ahead for Bryce Young and the types of defenses that he'll be facing. So open up with the Falcons, Saints, 2 division foes, then go out to Seattle. Cross country, definitely always difficult time to play in Seattle. Come back, play Minnesota, Lions, Dolphins into the bye. So not a devastating kind of opening there for a rookie quarterback. None of those are, I would say, defenses that you'd necessarily be afraid to play or that you'd be afraid to kind of put a rookie quarterback in front of. And even out of the bye, then you got Texans, Colts, and Bears. So, I mean, not a terrible schedule. We look at the strength of schedule 29, so one of the easiest schedules there is. So that's definitely going to help grease the wheels there.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at defenses, especially in that first slate, I'm looking at the Seattle Seahawks. They added a lot of depth to their defensive line. They went out and they grabbed a excellent corner to pair with Tyreek Woolen in this past draft with Devin Witherspoon. And then looking at the Dolphins, they have Vic Fangio and they added a lot of pieces on that defense. So I think that will definitely be a test. I think the biggest thing is to just get out without having Bryce Young or anybody hurt in that Dolphins game and just play a very simple game plan.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to ask, too much at a Bryce Young, especially early in the season. But as you say, it's not a daunting schedule, but again, as I have to mention on every stream, I'm not paying attention much to schedule. The teams we thought would be good, thought would be bad, turn out to not be the case. The Bucs are bad in the end. The Rams are bad in the end. All these things we kind of mark as wins and losses before the season turn out to, in hindsight, be a little foolish oftentimes. But I still think there is, it is one thing to have this schedule. It's another thing to kind of go in and play the Jets in week 1, the Commanders in week 2 or whatever it is. It's very different than kind of the schedule that Bryce Young is starting with. Which I'll add one more point. I was not so sold on. I guess maybe Steven, you're more tapped in. I didn't realize that Andy Dalton was for sure going to be the backup. I didn't know it was a done deal. But this schedule would lend itself to just handing it off to Young. It's not like you're going in for a ferocious start.
Yeah. No, not by any means. It goes back to exactly what we talked to earlier. This is a bottom 5 group at the wide receiver position. Thielen's old. DJ Chark has an injury history, and you're really banking on the upside that Mingo brings. So it's definitely going to be a rough start, but I think the pieces are there where you said year 2, year 3, especially they add another wide receiver next offseason. This is a group to start betting on because they're going to be really good.
From a Pythag 2.0 model perspective, slightly to the under, but basically not recommending a bet, only a 2% edge. See, the Panthers are only favored in 4 games, all in the second half of the year. Texans, Colts, Falcons, Bucks, and then an underdog in every other game. And certainly the back half is definitely more formidable than the front half. So you got the Cowboys, you got the Saints, the Packers, the Jags. But again, holistically, and again, there's always going to be an asterisk around how you evaluate schedules and whatnot. But you can also still operate under kind of like, again, those range of outcomes for these teams. And most of these teams have ranges of outcomes that are kind of tilted more towards the downside.
I want to make one more point here. And I probably should have made it when we were looking at when I was talking about Darnold's EPA, which I sparked by the VIG adjusted 7.7 wins, which is that they're replacing good production from their wins, meaning the wins that they had all coming from, Darnold got the majority of this team's win, good production at quarterback. So they do kind of, I assume the number that's placed at 7.5 is relative to last season's win expectation, which was on the backs of good quarterbacking. Again, I'm not saying that Sam Darnold's a good quarterback, but the production was there. And I think that angle kind of leads me to say that this pricing is a little bit off.
Yeah. Well, Darnold only did play 5 games. So.
But that's where they got their wins.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Falcons. Offensive and defensive EDP perspective. We can see around middle of the road when it comes to defense, still probably in the lower half. And then the kind of middle of the road kind of offense. Any thoughts from you here, Judah?
Yeah, actually, I think the range of outcome chart is best to kind of encapsulate this this Falcons team, which is like the left tail is not very wide to the left. It's kind of right down the middle, which is a very high floor team, but also not such a high ceiling or right distribution here. Right, if we look at the Saints, the Saints the mean was much worse than the Falcons, but their kind of right tail is very similar. Which is to say, I think that this almost perfectly encapsulates who the Falcons are, which is a high floor team. Again, as I said with the Panthers and the general note about a team that likes to run the ball and kind of bleed clock. That's what the Falcons are. And they played last year as kind of a run and gun. Marcus Mariota had one of the highest ADOTs. Desmond Ridder also. I imagine we'll see more of the same, which is kind of a lot of runs and a lot of deep passing, hiding their quarterback as much as they can, and they're going to finish with kind of mid results because that's the offense they're running. They made a lot of moves on defense. Perhaps that improves, but I think the perspective of the Falcons, maybe there's a lot of bullish talk, but looking back from last year, and we'll get into this in a second, was like this was a team that way overachieved, and I think the EDP chart says no, actually they're kind of exactly what their record indicates.
Mm-hmm.
I think to go off of what you're saying, Judah, Arthur Smith has a balanced approach where it's obviously very like set floor, but that ceiling's very questionable. He had a 58% pass rate out of 11 personnel, 52% out of 12 personnel, and 46% out of 21 personnel. And when you draft Bijan Robinson at running back, you have Matthew Bergeron slated as your starting left guard. That should improve your efficiency out of 12 personnel, and it's going to lead for those like play action deep shots down the field to Drake London, Kyle Pitts. And I think that's what we're going to see. Arthur Smith's that kind of guy where he's just going to pound the ball at you, and then off that, you're going to have play action.
Yeah, Falcons 7-10 last year, 8-1 ATS. We're looking at the power ranking volatility. Average rank was about 24th. Average opponent rank was about 18. 7-day rolling rank volatility, 2.5 spots. So not actually too volatile of a team. One of the things that we talked a lot about last year from in our season previews was just how overly bearish the market was on the Falcons going into last year. 4.5 wins, 5 wins, like Juice Silver was a little bit of how they were being priced. We were talking about a lot last season about how the market was pricing the Falcons like a few years ago, the Texans, when the Texans were blatantly tanking at the very beginning of the season. That's how the market was pricing the Falcons. That seemed overly bearish. We talked about how we liked the Falcons over. We were betting on the Falcons quite early last season, and actually we're making money. In fact, we started to abandon that thesis maybe a little bit too early, but we see we're actually right on target. The Falcons come out of the gate pretty hot. They impressed right out of the gate versus the Saints there at home. Covered again versus the Rams the next week. Covered it again versus Seattle week 3. Covered again versus the Browns week 4. Covered again versus the Bucs, and then again versus the Niners. And you see this climbing this wall of hatred that the market had for the Falcons. And then the market starts to, buy in, and then that's when they start to revert back to their assumed kind of former selves. And we can start to see here too, a lot of kind of good forecasting from Drive Quality, as we can kind of see starting to sell off on the Falcons, before the market starts to kind of catch up on that. And that's one of the reasons why, we're following Drive Quality. One of the reasons why, we made money on the Falcons like the first 3 weeks of the season, and then started to tail off, sold them a little bit too early. But we can see that, the market did start to follow along with Drive Quality by the end of the season as well. When we look at the week by week, not a lot of takeaways here. I see max deficits, some pretty ugly numbers. So they are definitely digging themselves some nasty holes over the course of the season. Down 25, down 21, down 21, down 13, down 10, down 13, down 14, down 14. So a lot of double-digit holes and not a lot of like big leads over the course of the season. So I see only 5 double-digit leads did they ever hold in any point in time in any game. The market was never too hot on them at any point in time. I see about 5 top 10 picks from a circuit perspective. Anything from you guys on this?
Yeah. One thing I'm going to look at is the active points here. The offense accounted for most of their positive active points at 13.5. And I say that because I think we're going to see a similar scenario this year where the market's going to kind of price in Desmond Ridder as a really bad quarterback, as they did with Marcus Mariota last year. And I think the point of the range of outcomes that we were just talking about is that, like, of all the teams in the NFL, I think the quarterback position matters least to the Falcons because they're going to hide him and because there are going to be games where he's going to attempt 15 passes, 20 passes, or whatever it is. It's a very low floor team. I think there's a chance for ceiling. I mean, you can talk yourself into Ridder. I know some people are doing that, but all this is to say, I think there is going to be value on the offense as a team that's going to be priced as one of the worst, I imagine. And I think it's a very similar constructed team to last year, and I see no reason why it shouldn't repeat itself.
The only holes...
Yeah, go on, Steven.
No, go for it. Yeah,
I was going to say from the max lead perspective, multiple games, did they never have a lead or a very short lead? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, almost half the season, did they never have a lead at any point in time in the game? And then another flurry of games, another 2 games where they only had a field goal lead.
That's a great point. And I think gets back to what you were saying earlier about trying to pay attention to some of these team tendencies. I don't think this is a team that's going to be able to come back in games. Right? It's if they're down, I think it's a team that's so reliant on being ahead and using that run game that they're going to struggle to mount comebacks.
Yeah. And we can also see actually they were losing at some point in time in every single game except for one. Week 6. Surprisingly versus the 49ers of all teams. Yeah. Never losing in that one.
Yeah, the biggest thing I will say that's probably going to help that swing back probably close to the average. They'll have a couple more leads, won't get blown out as much as they did add a lot to the defense. They added Calais Campbell, David Onyemata, and Bud Dupree. Now, all those guys are over the age of 30, so is Grady Jarrett, who's there, but you're going to get the ability to stop the run with those 4. And then when you look at what they did to the secondary, they paired Jesse Bates, went out and got Jeff Okudah. They have Mike Hughes, and they already have A.J. Terrell. And I think this is one of the more sneaky, underrated secondary groups in the NFL. So when you can stop the run with your front 4, you can drop those 4 back. You can send a couple guys on pressure like blitzes and stuff or simulate pressures and try to get after the quarterback that way. So I think they're going to be improved from a defensive standpoint. I think the biggest question mark is they don't have a true edge rusher who's going to be getting after the quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, I disagree with you there on the cornerbacks. I'm not exactly so bullish on Okudah. Hughes. Certainly, high draft pedigrees. And I think kind of to your point about the pass rush, they lack in the pass rush such that if the corners, I mean, again, they can turn it. Cornerback is the most volatile position in football. This could be a defense that is, turned for a bunch of big gains. The combination of a lack of pass rush and certainly Jeffrey Okudah has been a very beatable corner. Hughes has been a very beatable corner. Plenty of weak links in the secondary. This does seem, especially if they're good against the run, as I think they will be, as you point out, a team to attack via the passing game, especially early in the season.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, A.J. Terrell is going to have to be the centerpiece there. Jeff Okudah has to be the Robin to him as Batman. So we'll see how that plays out.
But that narrative of like, oh, they improved their defense, I think is going to be valuable for DFS or betting props, maybe even some early same game parlays. Not to get too ahead of ourselves, but that's something I definitely want to keep on my radar.
This is a pretty wild one. I've been thinking about it for like the last 3 minutes, trying to piece it together. I was almost thinking that this is an error in the code here, that the Falcons beat the 49ers by 14 points and never trailed, and they won 28-14. And I'm like, did that really happen? Yeah. And now I do remember us live betting the Niners to come back.
14,
and they could never flirt. They could never flirt. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely.
I think they showed like one decent drive in the second half or something, or right before the first half, that looks like, all right, like it's going to start to happen now. And yeah, they couldn't get within 2 touchdowns. Like, pretty wild game. And that looks like it was pretty much probably the peak for the team. Yeah, that was right after that Niners game. And then it was a reversion back to what the market was pricing at the beginning of the season. All right, so offseason changes. Jonnu Smith, I think, is an interesting ad. Obviously having that relationship with Arthur Smith.
So here's the thing about Arthur Smith. Before he was the offensive coordinator for Mike Vrabel, he was the tight ends coach for Ken Whisenhunt in Tennessee. So why he takes Kyle Pitts at 4, why he brings Jonnu Smith back, like now you start to see the philosophy from Arthur Smith and why he's built this roster the way it is.
Yeah, no, I think gets to the point of that floor offense. I want to run tight ends, a bunch of 12 personnel. I just want to pick up a bit on Desmond Ridder. Present maybe a case for the upside. Again, I think this is going to be a floor offense. He was awesome in a bunch of the kind of unstable areas. So like how he played under pressure, according to PFF, had like a 98th percentile grade on perfectly covered plays, had like a top 5 EPA. And I think that kind of shows up on film of a guy who can kind of create out of nothing. And I think that's why some of the film people have fallen in love with him a bit over the course of this offseason. If he can get better in kind of all of the areas in which quarterbacks generally get better, I'm looking at the percentage of times he throws to an open receiver, basically across the board. Every quarterback from a rookie to your sophomore to your third year improves in that category, just as your ability to process improves and your ability to adjust the speed of the NFL improves. It's like if he can get better in those areas, which are generally the stable ones, then he can put together some good, a good year, assuming that the traditionally unstable metrics, but because of his skill set, his ability to kind of create, because he's definitely got a good arm and can definitely use his mobility to avoid sacks, right? If that's sticky and he can get better as everyone else does, there's certainly a case for Ridder to be good. I'm not betting that. I'm not buying that, but I certainly think that it would be remiss to overlook that possibility.
Sure.
I think
I think a lot of people are focusing on that upside.
Interesting. I haven't heard that.
The upside to your point, because I have heard it from some people, and I'm with you, Judah. I'm not really high on Ridder because this is his first full year as a starter. But what I will say is Mariota absolutely sucked at hitting the deep ball last year. And deep ball accuracy is volatile year to year. So if Ridder can come in and just hit those open guys that are running downfield and your Kyle Pitts and your Drake Londons off those play actions, the fan base is going to love him because, yeah, he's going to make a couple bonehead decisions throughout a game. Like that's just going to happen. And you just want him to play consistent and within the system.
So I'll have to watch more too, because not a lot comes to mind from watching them at the end of last season. But I did just last week rewatch that Saints game, week 15, 18-21 loss. And the reason I watched it was I didn't like actively select that game. It was just like the first one that came up when I was like looking for highlights on YouTube. And I did it just because I had been seeing sort of like a litany of different tweets from different people kind of arguing for upside for the Falcons, specifically due to potential outperformance from Desmond Ridder. And like that Saints game looks like vintage, every single thing you would not want a quarterback to be doing. Looks slow to process, looks at one wide receiver, overthrows them, looks inaccurate. Just there was nothing. I don't think there was one play, maybe like one at the very, very end, where the defense looked like it broke down anyway, and hit someone like over the middle for like 10 yards. It all looked ugly. It looked terrible. I'm like, what do people see in this guy? Like, there's nothing. There's no promise. There was no promise from that game. Now it's just one, and it was his first. So that he's played another few games, but it was a 9-17 loss to the Ravens, and then squeaked one out versus the miserable Cardinals, and then won that last game versus the Bucs when I think the Bucs didn't even need to win it.
Backups. They were losing, yeah.
Yeah. So again, like the asterisk is I don't remember a lot from those games. I mean, look at the QB EPA here, and again, there's tons of asterisks with that, of course, but those aren't shining stats either. But I just know in that Saints game, he looked like a piece of shit. So like,
I assumed expectations were as low as could be when I was presenting that case, right? If people are thinking he's anything but a 30th to 32nd best quarterback in the league, I think that's wrong expectation-wise. I think there's like a chance he becomes like 25 or 23. Granted, I don't think the quarterback matters that much, but I think it's helpful to set the expectation there. If it's as you say, where people are really talking themselves into the upside of Desmond Ridder, I think that presents betting value if that's reflected in the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something to keep an eye on. I just know, from what I've anecdotally listened to and heard, and that's why we'll continue to bring online our sentiment analyzer so we can quantify it even better. And I don't just have to talk about just my own anecdotal experiences. All right, Falcons in 2023. Look at their schedule over the course of the season. Pythag 2.0 model has a short lean to the over 3.3% edge, so it's not going to actually make any bets. Strength of schedule from a futures implied perspective, one of the easiest, ranked 31st. Net rest, -4 days. Mean spread is about pick'em. And we can kind of see that, a handful of games that they're favored, handful of games that they're underdogs, kind of up and down a little bit. What I would say is like, this is a relatively tough start for a team that people are potentially high on. I mean, you have to see there's a huge repricing of this team. Now, how meaningfully different is this team from the team of last year? The team was priced at 4.5 wins last year. Now they're priced at 8.5 wins, a doubling. And there's people outwardly bullish. So they've been repriced up and people want to buy them. Whereas last year they were sold off hard and no one wanted to touch them. And I don't even know what's changed.
The NFC South.
Yeah, Tom Brady's not there anymore.
But
we were talking, but fine, the broader market doesn't realize that. But last year we were already talking about that was going to happen.
No, I certainly agree. I'm just trying to understand the expectation there. And I think there was a correction, which is like they won 7 games last year and Mariota wasn't that good. What could kind of change? Which is the argument I've presented. But I agree with you. There's definitely value on the under for exactly the reasons you're outlining.
But do you think like Mariota did not play well, but there was games that he did play well, and net, like what's the probability that Desmond Ridder in totality is going to offer meaningfully more upside than Mariota? I think he has more possibility to offer meaningful downside.
Agree. That's why I like the under, and I led with that. We were looking at the lines to start with.
Yeah, I mean, 4 of their 5 starters on the offensive line last year played over 99% of the snaps. So, I mean, you had continuity there with Mariota and Ridder to where they at least had some form of a pocket. As some of those guys get injured, I mean, that definitely shakes it up to where that under you can juice a lot more.
Plus, the wide receiving core is pretty thin, right?
It's real. They're starting Mac Hollins.
Yeah, Mac Hollins. They have Scotty Miller, I believe. I may be wrong on the Scotty Miller, but yeah, it's just they don't have anybody outside of Drake London. They're going to be running a lot of 2 tight end sets. They're going to be leaning on Bijan. And like I said, if that offensive line gets hurt, like they have, I think they just re-signed Chris Lundstrom. They just drafted Matthew Bergeron. They have Jake Matthews at left tackle. So they have some high name dudes on that offensive line, but we'll see.
This is a weak roster. The more I'm looking at it, it's yes, you can fall in love with the talent of London and Pitts. That's very weak. One of them goes down. I mean, like you just have a defensive game plan that just like takes out the one guy. That's easy. And,
Yeah.
like yes, they're going to be creative in the run game, and I think again it's relative to expectation. But this team does not look good at all. I think I've said this 100 times about the floor of this team, but I'm really struggling to find the ceiling. The more
I always feel like in the offseason, everyone's like, well, there's a guy, Arthur Smith. They got Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith's a great play designer. And it's like always like this bullish ammunition. But then in the season, when you're actually trying to bet them, they're like, but Arthur Smith, like so conservative, like they don't try to capitalize when they should. And like, I would like the Falcons here, but they have Arthur Smith calling plays. And so it like starts to swing like the other way. I remember throughout all of the middle half of last season, like people would cite Arthur Smith as a negative factor, not a positive one.
I was going to say, I feel like that was certainly the off-season outlook for the team. It was like Arthur Smith negative. I think I'm alone thinking that he's a good play designer. And I think even the fact that he's play designer is definitely a little tap.
Well, Steven, don't some of your charts and stuff put him up there or no?
I have Arthur Smith. He's, I think, right around Ben Johnson, which are in like the teens. And I know that seems a little low on Ben Johnson, but he's consistent as a play caller. I mean, Marcus Mariota, like say what you want about him. The guy was, I think, in like slightly above average in like EPA and then success rate. And just like looking at that where he's having consistently positive plays when he's dropping back, like, and it's Marcus Mariota. So it's like, okay, so if he can scheme that up for Ritter, who we're talking about, like, honest to goodness, you just take him as like a talent as is. He's probably the 30th to 32nd best quarterback, but he could be performing EPA wise around like quarterback 20. And that could be kind of the boost that Arthur Smith is giving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The other thing is the teams in this division, again, we talked about the Panthers, talked about the Bucs. If they have any, like, at least potentially like somewhat consistent strength, it's the defensive side. And I mean, that's not going to help essentially a rookie quarterback and Desmond Ritter. Yeah. Sell, fade, all under Falcons. Fuck the Falcons.
What are they at? 8.5 right now? Yeah, that's
8.5.
I think that like if you get to 9 wins in the NFC South, you're going to win the division. And I could definitely see it's like last year, a team with 8 wins. Like this is something where, yeah, it's hard to see the Falcons winning more than 8, no more than 9 games this season.
Yeah, I like the regular under more than I like the alt under, but I certainly like the under here.
Yeah, the weak division, relatively weak schedule. Although, actually, I don't even think the schedule is that weak. Basically, close to plus 200 on under Falcons. I think that actually does sound pretty attractive. So far, that is my favorite bet for the division. Because, I mean, when I look at their schedule, too, like, open Panthers, Packers, Lions, Jags. That's going to be tough. The Texans are going to be better, you'd think.
Yeah.
Washington, I mean, again, they could be sneaky. Vikings, like, you got to I could easily see them coming out, going into the bye with 3 wins. And then you come out, and then you got Saints, Jets. Then you got the Panthers again. Colts could potentially be tricky. I mean, I don't see where you see 9 wins here.
I don't think it's a particularly daunting schedule. I mean, like, they're looking at the Panthers and being like, oh, it's the Panthers. We get to play the Panthers.
They're playing the AFC South. And let's be honest, the AFC South is the worst division in football. NFC South is close behind, but the AFC South is the worst.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, you get to play the Bears. And here's the thing, like the Jets seem great and all. And I love how you have on the charts where you have the starting quarterback, but who's to say Aaron Rodgers doesn't get hurt? And now all of a sudden you're playing a backup quarterback. All of a sudden, some of these games down the stretch, they don't seem nearly as daunting as they do back in September. So I think a lot of them are going to be competitive. I look at that Washington game. You could have a Howell Ritter face off, and that could be a complete dumpster fire of a game, which would just be fun to watch from a defensive perspective.
And that's why that mean spread is basically pick 'em. So that falls like right in line with that. But also when you have a mean spread of pick 'em, that doesn't actually sound like that easy of a schedule.
Yeah.
Means you have a 50% chance potentially of winning any given game. All right, Saints, division favorites. Another team in that same kind of quartile there on looking at the EDP chart, offensive and defense. Another team, the third of the division, that sits in that quartile of having a pretty decent defense, but not a good offense. So kind of like all having kind of similar thematic factors here underlying these teams, at least last year. And again, a lot of it does rhyme this year. When we look at the power ranking volatility for the Saints, this is one that I pointed out to you when I was running this, Judah, where we can see here, drive quality really liked the Saints pretty much all year. And the market did catch up with drive quality. So as the market started to really ramp up towards the end of the season, drive quality was basically flat because we were already there. So again, this is another example of the market catching up to it. What I would say is drive quality was maybe a little bit too hot, too fast, a little bit too eager on the Saints, because a lot of that performance didn't actually come through from a betting perspective, even though those underlying fundamentals seem to actually be there. And I know the Saints, because of this, was not a team that I have very fond memories, particularly betting.
Yeah, they definitely led to some heartbreak. I have to remember
especially that Ravens one.
The Ravens one, and I remember that Rams game when I had a -9.5 paired with the Dalton passing yards and
oh yeah,
Rams.
But you did hit the nice. That was the last leg of the okay.
It was just two. It was just two legs. It was Dalton passing and Saints -9.5. The Saints had the ability to run out the clock, and then Bryce Perkins led a 55-yard drive with 40 seconds left, and then a Matt Gay walk-off 56-yard field goal. Well, I guess it didn't walk off, but just as time expired, and ruined my 12-1 parlay. That was a little bit of a tough one.
I just remember the one that stuck out to me is definitely that Ravens one, because, and I think this is partly what was driving it, was drive. That was the peak of when drive quality really loved the Saints. I remember you really liked the Saints in this one.
I want to say it was a primetime game.
Yeah. I think it was Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
And I like the Saints going in that one too. I love any opportunity to fade the Ravens. So
yeah. I think I lost more money on the Saints than I did any other team. As I'm looking through this, I'm just like, man, I missed a lot on this team. So that's a cautionary tale from what I'm sure is going to be a bullish case for them in a couple minutes.
And when we look at a little bit of a deeper dive here, I can see, this was a team that had a lot of intra-game volatility, a lot of double-digit deficits, a lot of double-digit leads. Kind of really all over the place, which made it very difficult to bet them. I remember this actually makes sense. Even when we were betting them in game, I remember some heartbreaks, especially versus the Steelers. That was one that comes to mind, where it was the Saints clearly looked like the better team, but just could not capitalize on opportunities presented to themselves. Saints a very frustrating team, and the market never really bought into them. We don't see any top 10 picks from a Circa Ranks perspective after week 2. Market opens up hot on them, likes them top 8 pick, top 3 pick, and then it just never a top 10 pick again after that.
Just didn't like Andy Dalton. Winston last game in week 3, and then after that, it was Dalton the whole way.
Yeah, you're right.
Actually, a good point. It's a very good point. Which is ironic.
See, that's why I do like seeing the quarterback numbers, because actually I felt like maybe Dalton played a handful of games, but I don't remember him playing actually almost a full season.
Yeah,
I mean, and he played well.
Yeah.
Like, do you guys, and this is just an honest question, like, do you guys think Derek Carr is like a marginally like huge upgrade to Andy Dalton?
I was going to say this as the central question. The answer is, in a vacuum, I would absolutely rather Derek Carr than Andy Dalton. But if we reframe the question to be, do I think that Andy Dalton's production from last year will be matched by Derek Carr? The answer is probably no. Like, Andy Dalton had a sneaky good year last year. You look at a bunch of different efficiency metrics. I think I posted a bunch of charts of quarterback play recently, and Andy Dalton was always in the right spot of those. He was extremely accurate. I think he was 4th in accuracy. He was like 4th in PFF grade. He was pretty high up there in EPA. Like, he had a really good season. Again, that does not mean that he's necessarily going to have another very good season, but it does show that the production that the Saints are replacing is high level. I'm not sure that Carr is going to be able to kind of produce that. I think that's definitely up for debate.
I like what they've done with the offensive line. Last year, Trevor Penning saw the field for 12% of the snaps. Andres Pete only saw it for 55% of the plays. If they're able to stay on the field more, that anchors your left-hand side, and you already got Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, and Ryan Ramczyk on that right-hand side holding that down. So that's a solid O-line. That's going to pave the way for Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams. The biggest thing is who's going to be the next guy after Chris Olave? Is it going to be Foster Moreau, who they brought in from Las Vegas? Is Rashid Shaheed? Is he going to step up more now in year 2? And he did, absolutely. I think that offensively is the biggest question, is who's going to be the number 2 guy that Carr is going to in that offense. Because like you said, Judah, when you only have one guy on an offense, it's very easy to scheme to take him out of the game completely. And so you really need that number 2 guy to open things up.
Steven, it was
Michael Thomas's deal.
He's healthy, but who knows?
He's healthy, yeah.
I was just going to say, Steven, that was a perfect framing, because I can understand kind of your hesitations of the team, and why I'm super excited is I think I'm the biggest Rashid Shaheed stan there is out there. This is a guy who ranked, I think, 3rd in yards per route run. He is I just built a expected yards after the catch. He's top 5 in that metric. He's top 5 in separation. The dude is an absolute baller.
And he played about 30% of the snaps, so it wasn't like a super small sample size.
They started him as, I think, a bit of a gadget player, and I think he'll regress in some metrics, like yards per route run, for instance, because I think the big plays will inevitably regress. Get a bunch of those crazy touchdowns. But this guy can get open, and that's sticky year over year. I think he can really step up. I also don't think I should just say that Chris Olave is better than we think he is. Like, I think
he is.
I think he's really good, though.
I'm saying I think
he's better than I think.
Yeah, I think he's like, we're going to be talking about Chris Olave in the same category that we talk about Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams by this season's end. This guy is absolutely great in every facet of the game. And you look at that, I mean, Michael Thomas is a bonus at this point, if you're getting production from Rashid Shaheed, which is an if, but I'm certainly bullish on that. So I'm going to work under the assumption that Shaheed is at least somewhat of the player he was in his small sample last year. And then it's like, okay, if you get Michael Thomas in there, this could be a really, really good passing offense. And Derek Carr doesn't even have to do too much. And you put it in the context of the NFC, they've got good tackles. They've got the potential for terrific wide receivers. And like, Derek Carr can be elevated by his system around him. He can be elevated by good receivers. And then you're like, oh, I can talk myself into the Saints with a really fat right tail given the context of the NFC. Right? Like,
my biggest hesitation, though, it comes on the defensive side. I mean, you got, I think it's 5 almost. Yeah, it's going to be 6 players that are over the age of 30. Cameron Jordan at 34, Demario Davis at 34, Tyrann Mathieu at 31, Marcus May at 30, Bradley Roby at 31. And then when you look at what happened
in the offseason.
They lost David Onyemata, Shai Tuttle, Marcus Davenport, all gone. Now, that combined for a little over 1,700 defensive snaps that they just lost. And all of those guys played at least 40% of the snaps. And you're replacing that with Nathan Shepard, Brian Brisset out of Clemson, and then they also drafted Isaiah Foskey. I think they should have gone more at BJ Ojulari in the draft to get some more explosion off the edge with how old Cameron Jordan is. But this is just – it's something where the defensive line, it doesn't look good, and they have a lot of age on that defense. That's where the regression is going to be. I think exactly like what you're saying, the offense, there's a lot to be excited about if everything comes together. Michael Thomas stays healthy. Rashid Shaheed does what he's been doing. Like, that's cool. But this defense, it could fall off really quickly.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the bearish case is this is a very fragile defense, but it's like one of those things where you say, like, if they can push it off another year, right? Like if Cam Jordan's then you can talk yourself into a case. But I totally agree with you. It's very fragile. There are a lot of kind of potential guys falling off a cliff.
And there
I don't like the
games.
Falcons. I don't like the Falcons defensive line, and I think the Saints is worse. That's kind of my
interesting.
point.
That's interesting. I still think like Cam Jordan's a productive player, and even Carl Granderson was good in small snaps last year. But that's totally fair. And I think we should be cautious of the Saints defense falling off a bit,
and especially because they leaned on them so strongly. Specifically in the second half of last year. And the offense, again, a lot of these like very puzzling performances, again, only scored 10 points versus Pittsburgh, scored 0 versus San Francisco, scored 16 versus Tampa, scored 20 versus the Falcons, 17 versus the Browns, 7 versus the Panthers. Like, really bad offensive performances. And the only reason that they hung in those games because their defense was able to keep the other side, under 20 points.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the first versus second half. I'm just looking at the earned drive points. I'll just list up 24, 25, 22, 18, 27, 19, 31, 25, second half. 16, 8, 19, 13, 15, 21, 14, 18, 15. Noticeable drop off in the second half. I have no hypothesis as to why, and nothing of memory kind of sparks that. But it's interesting.
It could just be a failure to adjust.
Yeah, it could be a failure to adjust. It could be a bunch of different factors.
Is that drive quality for the offense or for the defense that you were listing?
Offense. This is all the offense.
Well, I mean, when you look at I'm just going to go the defenses on the front, like half the slate, like the Vikings, the Seahawks defense, they're nothing to write home about. The Cardinals, the Raiders, they weren't. But when you look at some of those second half defenses, you're facing the 49ers, the Browns came on late, the Eagles weren't bad. Like that could be maybe the difference. But yeah, that is definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's definitely a dichotomy of easier defenses in the front half and tougher defenses in the second half. But then the fact that you're a prisoner to exactly the type of defense that you're playing then. Like, if it's a good one, then you outperform. If it's a bad one, then you got no chance. Or you're going to look dead in the water.
What do you guys think? Pete Carmichael, he was there with Sean Payton a couple years ago. He's still the OC there. Do you think he's able to kind of milk out the rest of Alvin Kamara now that he's kind of winding down probably on his peak days?
Well, I think the other thing what we need to know too, Kamara's going to miss like at least 4 games.
He did.
Well, I think the charges may have been dropped.
Yeah, but
isn't there still a suspension?
They did sign Jamal Williams. Not that I'm ecstatic about running backs in the first place as really influencing stuff, but yeah, Kamara is definitely going to miss.
He's going to miss some games, yeah, for sure.
He also hasn't been that good recently.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Do you think he'll make a resurgence like Saquon did last year, stuff like that?
No, not a there's vintage Kamara, I think, is in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
But I think he can still. He's multidimensional still, though.
Yes.
Like brings
They refused to use him as a passer. I remember a week where like David Johnson had more routes run than Alvin Kamara. It was completely inexcusable. I don't know why that anecdote. I guess that anecdote should stay with you. You know, David Johnson, like out of the league, comes back and has more passing reps than Alvin Kamara. But yeah, I'm not so bullish on Carmichael. I'm curious where he ranks in your offensive.
I think he's in the 20s right now with the latest model, which I think is appropriately ranked.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
What do we guys think about their road ahead in 2023? Pythag 2.0 medal likes the Saints over 6.8% edge. So that was not enough of a trigger. The way we used Pythag 2.0 model last year to make futures bets was a 10% edge. So this would not be sufficient, but small over. Strength of schedule 32nd. So again, futures implied this is the easiest schedule there is. Net rest plus 3 days. Mean spread about -2, so about a 2-point favorite on average. Again, futures sitting at that 9.5, big adjusted 9.2. So juice to the over, or to the under. What do we see?
It's definitely an easy slate at the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Also, you definitely want to play the AFC South teams earlier. Also, I feel like it's perfect range where you're going to get rookie quarterbacks. Like even if Anthony Richardson doesn't start off the season, you're going to get early season Richardson. You're going to get early season Stroud. Even if Gardner Minshew starts the season for the Colts, I don't think Davis Mills has a chance of starting the season for the Texans. But
that's true.
Kind of a lot of teams you'd rather play early in the season.
Yeah, it's the slate down the stretch that if for some reason you have a team like the Panthers or the Falcons that are hanging in the division and they're jarring for that, like you have the Vikings, the Bears, the Lions, the Giants, like those are tough teams. Those are good teams as they're constructed right now. So, and then you have a bunch of division games. So that's where I would see stuff starting to go sideways for them is around week 9, because like you said, you have all these young quarterbacks. You play the AFC South literally by week 8. Half your games are the AFC South. So there really is no reason for the Saints not to have a winning record going into their bye.
Yeah. I mean,
and plus you got Jordan Love again, question marks there. Who knows? Maybe if things are really a dumpster fire with the Bucs, I mean, do you have Kyle Trask at week 4?
Wow, yeah,
that would be quite the switch. It's after.
I mean, if you're gonna go full dumpster fire, like
after the 40-10 loss in week 4, that's when you go full dumpster fire, and the Bucs are off to a rough start.
Usually you give it a month. That's why I'm like, week 4 if he's starting. If Kyle Trask is starting by week 4.
I don't know. You see, like literally, I mean, we've seen it numerous times where it's like after week 2, it's like there's so much pressure on a team to like make a switch already, and then it happens. Like, well, what was it? What was it last year? I mean, Baker was out of Carolina fast.
He was, but some of that was derailed by injury. I think he played 4-ish weeks. I may be wrong, but he looked awful then, and he could look awful again in Tampa.
I'm just wondering who you're thinking of.
Yeah, there was who were the rookie? There was like 6 rookie quarterbacks last year, but there was a rookie basically didn't start the year, but then he was starting by like week 2.
Week 2. Was it a high round draft pick? Because I don't think Sam Howell didn't come in.
No, it was last. Howell was week.
He came in late.
That was the tail end of the season.
Yeah.
Corral never saw the field.
I'm doing a quick scan right now. Maybe it was 2 years ago. It's Justin Fields and Andy Dalton.
Just that happened.
Oh, Trey Lance. He was hurt.
Yeah, but then it was Jimmy G who came in. It wasn't a rookie.
True. Either way.
But yeah, definitely not a daunting schedule for sure.
It's the strength of schedule that it's going to come back to. It looks like they have net rest, so they aren't traveling, or the rest in between games isn't horrendous. So
Right.
I'm honestly surprised they're favored against the Jaguars at home. I think that says more about the Jaguars than it does the Saints. But yeah, winnable schedule.
I think that says a lot about how the market is relatively hot on the Saints.
Yeah,
because the market's hot on the Jags.
Yeah.
Their tackle play is what's concerning. They should have that. They actually do. That's the first week I think they get Cam Robinson back, so they actually might play better versus the Saints then.
There you go. But a 9.2 VIG adjusted total, not very high, especially not with this division in the schedule.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I guess my concern is I don't love the coaching staff. There's questions on the defense, and then Derek Carr is just kind of like a head case. I feel like if this is his spot, he gets the right emotional support and things start going their way, then it could potentially feed on itself. But it's the dude does not handle adversity very well. Doesn't seem like he handles criticism very well. So
we got to get the the press conferences.
Yeah, that's another thing that we'll have.
Yeah, get him reading the sentiment of Derek Carr. I think that definitely is anecdotally true. Of Carr having a tough time handling criticism. Those reports definitely came out.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe that happens week 2. A vicious Panthers defense rattles him. Then he has to go to Lambeau, struggles.
That Packers defense,
those vicious Panthers D,
it can be a vicious Panthers D.
Okay. We got Evero from Denver. We have Evero from Denver, and as long as we got J.C. Horn and Brian Burns and Derek Brown on the field, that's going to be scary for them.
And hey, and you come out with one of those random red hot starting games from the Titans. Everyone's talking about Tannehill, the Hopkins, Henry, oh my gosh, Titans. 0-3.
I'm excited to replay that. I have to make a mental note of this when my Saints, bullish offense case comes through and they hang up 31 against the Panthers. And I'll remember the ferocious Panthers D.
You'll remember the ferocious
Saints 0-3. Then they go home versus the Bucs. Okay, and if you struggle or lose that game, now you're 0-4. Then going to Foxborough. All right.
It's over at that point, but we're so deep in your theoretical that has no chance that it doesn't matter.
I mean, every single game I talked about is under a field goal spread. So, that's within. Yes. Yeah, it's 3.
Yeah, the Titans play hard under Mike Vrabel, and that defensive line still looks the same. I know there's questions on the offense.
You're giving me some fodder for more.
I'm betting the Titans.
Saints bullish case. I don't even want to do it. I think their defense is too fragile. But the more you're feeding the beast here.
I think you have going back to your opening comments. You have sufficiently mitigated, taken some of the steam off of flirting with what a potential Bucs upside could look like. That does seem slimmer.
That was the main.
And I would say that the downside does seem massive. Again, fewest wins. Actually, that might be my favorite bet of this division is fewest wins plus 800 on the Bucs, because you want to bet fewest wins on those teams that have the potential to actually, let's blow things up. Where there is no long-term answers on that team. They're not even flirting with long-term answers. So there's bad teams out there. Maybe the Texans are bad, but they're clearly building something there. Where the Bucs here, this is when you're in no man's land. It's there's nothing, every single player on this team might be gone in 2 years. Yeah. Coaching staff gone, everyone on offense gone, everyone on defense gone. Totally different team in 2 years. That's the type of team you would want to bet fewest wins on.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree. And even just to complete this, I think my 2 favorite bets, and I'm not even sure I've got leans on under Falcons and under Panthers. I don't think I'm going to bet those, though. just because I think the expectations are still pretty low. I think it's the
Definitely don't like under Panthers.
What?
Definitely don't like under Panthers.
I was just gonna say as you just said, I have no reason to re-articulate what you just said about the Bucs. I think that's exactly true, and I think the Saints should be clear division favorites. I like that bet a lot,
Yes.
and I like the right tail of the Saints. I can see this as a team that, just based on their record, they get that passing game going. It's 2023 NFL. The passing game is what matters. If those receivers are as good as they could be, in the passing game, I can see this team kind of being like, what? The Saints went 12-5. The Saints went 13-4. I'm not sure they're that good, but in this NFC, I can see that happening. And I like the fat right tail of the Saints. I think the mean is probably kind of as is. 9.5 is about right. Fat right tail of the Saints and the fat left tail of the Bucs.
I like that because also, like, when you try to think about same thing as basically what we're talking about, the fat tails and around the Bucs and Saints, is if you think about if everything goes right for any of these teams. So everything goes right for the Panthers, for the Falcons, for the Bucs, for the Saints. Who does that look the best for? Definitely looks the best for the Saints if everything goes right.
Of course.
And then same thing as everything goes wrong, it looks the worst for the Bucs. And also, I do like the Saints as a potential as the division winner. One, because it's not a sexy pick. I mean, again, they're like plus 120 or something like that to win the division.
Yeah.
They're the clear favorites, as you talked about. So therefore, not a lot of people really find a lot of excitement or edge to do that. But if they should be minus 150, that's huge edge.
Yeah, I think it should be closer to minus 120, 130. Yeah, that's the way to take a mild. The last thing I'll say, take a mild bearish on the Falcons, mild bearish on the Panthers, and be like, that's the Saints division bet right there. Because I think that there's not enough mispricing to bet the game totals, or the win totals, excuse me, because there's a bunch of variance that can happen, and a team can kind of sneak to 7-8 wins even without being that good. But
which is why you always lean to the alts. Just lean to the alts then.
You lean to the alts, but I think the division is the best way there because I think that the mean spot for the Saints is just way higher, and they have that right tail.
Yeah. So division Saints, fewest wins Bucs. I don't like actually, and in conjunction with that, I wouldn't bet Bucs under because again I can see how it can potentially matter. But I do like fewest wins Bucs definitely. Yeah. Oh, I would even take all over Saints, but I do agree like Saints division at plus money definitely looks like the safer version of that. I definitely do not want to flirt with anything under on Panthers because I think basically Bryce Young is like the core weakness there. And if he doesn't like blatantly suck, I think they can definitely be sneaky like they were last year. Always a tough game for teams, and potentially could even flirt with the division if things kind of go sideways for all the teams. And I like fading the Falcons here because maybe I'm dead wrong on Desmond Ridder. I only watched the one game, but that one game, man, he looked bad. He looked like nothing, no promise. And there seems like a lot of steam on Falcons right now, so I'd be fading that. Yep. That's my summary. How about you, Steven? What's your
final summary? I think you guys convinced me not to be so bullish on the Falcons, but I do think this will probably then still come down to the Saints Panthers for the division. Again, I think the first team, the 9 wins the division. I don't see a double-digit team winning. Like I know, Judy, you were kind of throwing out, and the strength of schedule definitely alludes itself to it that they could pull out 12, 13 wins, especially if they grind out a couple. I would hit the under on the Bucs. I don't like what the Buccaneers look like. I think they're falling apart. I think Todd Bowles is somebody that if you want to bet the first coach fired, he's the first guy out the door. I think he's on a very hot seat, and the team is falling apart.
That's another good one.
Yep.
Bowles first head coach fired.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Especially because they have the first year OC, right? So
I did a little bit more background. He has been with Seattle over the past several years. He was the quarterback coach last year, which with the whole Geno stuff, maybe you think he can do some quarterback whispering with Kyle Trask and Baker Mayfield, but I don't really put a lot of money on that.
Come on, though.
All right, that was a nice warm-up. NFC South, 2 hours of deep intellectual debate on the best division in football. Asterisk, worst.
Save that for the AFC South. Save that for the AFC South. But yeah, we're down there. We're down there.
That's true. All right. Good stuff, guys. That's it. We got one in the rearview mirror. We'll probably do the second best division in football, the AFC South, next. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Steven. Thanks, Judah. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And that's closing bet.
There we go.